Title of my talk is The Contribution of Animal Recording to the Profitability of Irish Farms, and I'd like to acknowledge at this stage my co-authors Thierry Pabieux and John McCarthy from ICBF. In terms of the areas I'd like to cover this morning, it's really to talk in overall terms about genetic gain in Ireland and how we look to achieve that, to talk about increases in data recording, to quantify the benefits of data recording in terms of financial benefits, profit per year, per animal. And we'll do that through some genetic analysis, some trend analysis, but also some phenotypic analysis, and then to present an overall summary. So if we talk about genetic gain in Ireland, we have two main indexes: the Dairy Economic Breeding Index, which is expressed in terms of profit per lactation, and we have the Beef Eurostar system, which is expressed in terms of profit per progeny. So if we come back to the profitability theme, it's certainly very much ingrained in ICBF and what we do in terms of as we quantify genetic gain. Very often when we think about achieving genetic gain, and as organisations involved in animal recording and breeding, it really does come down to these core technical capabilities that there are within our organisations. And we generally, at least in ICBF, organise ourselves into three key areas: the collection of data, the key data on which we want to evaluate animals, the generation of genetic indexes, and then to have breeding programs that ensure the best of those animals get widely used through the industry, and in that way generate genetic gain. And most of our conferences and focus as people working in organisations and industry are really around aspects of each of these three areas. And the one that we're particularly focused here on within ICAR is more probably these first two, data and genetic indexes. But there is another key component to achieving genetic gain, and this is the whole area of industry structure. That unless we have a strong industry structure or can achieve a strong industry structure, and the key parts of that are to have a shared vision within the industry that is going to require long-term investment in cattle breeding initiatives that will result in a coherent industry structure that works along with the technical capabilities to generate genetic gain. And if we think about that in terms of the industry structure, I'd like to start off by drawing an example of that, which is the cattle breeding database, the central database that you've heard so much about in the few days that you have been here since the start of the ICAR and Interbull meetings. Because that central database, whilst there's aspects of it, there's technical aspects to it, the bottom line of it is it's really down to industry structure. It was down to key people within the industries and sections within the industry having a shared vision and prepared to put in long-term investment to establish a single central database. And that's really, as I would see it, the bedrock of all what ICBF can do and talk about is really founded around that central database. To talk briefly about some of the aspects of it, and the database is built on this excellent working relationship with our Department of Agriculture. The Minister will be here this morning as well, where we effectively piggyback on or work on the back of the births and movements and deaths systems. This is the EU traceability system, and this is providing feeds into the database on a daily basis. And then we have our service providers. These are the ones in many ways, along with the department, that had the long-term vision and put the capital up to establish the central database, to put their data into this database to generate and run services from. And from that, we've also been able to engage with stakeholders, the laboratories, marts, milk and meat factories, to also put their data into this central database, but all with that shared vision of profit for farmers and the industry. And the genetic evaluation data, the team that I work with, routinely that data comes out and we generate genetic evaluations. And all of this data, of course, allows us to provide services to our farmers, to our industry, and it's done through various mediums, through the service providers, but also through these various links, discussion groups, Teagasc advisors, veterinarians, and the direct service Herd Plus. And the net effect of that consolidation has been, and shared vision has been, a dramatic increase in the number of data records. These are animal records in the database. From when the database was established with the migration of the data from the service providers in 2002, which was really Holstein Friesian and milk recording. The beef herd books came through in 2004. AI company data and running services there came through in 2006. And most recently, we have had a big increase in beef data through a Department of Agriculture scheme called the Suckler Cow Welfare Scheme. And all of this has moved us from a scenario of having 5 million or less than 5 million to 30 million animal records over the space of about 10 years. So huge increases in data recording, and all of this is obviously very positive for our service providers as well. To now try and quantify the euro benefits of data recording, and the first is just to look at some genetic analysis using fertility as an example, and then to talk about the dairy EBI and the suckler beef value. And this is the backdrop in which I joined ICBF in late 1998. You know, this was high-index Holsteins, not the answer, very disappointing results. Fertility, we'd had the Holsteinization through the 80s and the 90s, and our dairy farmers, because of the seasonal pasture systems here, were starting to encounter adverse fertility performance and really, really disappointed. And if you look at this and draw a circle, measures of fertility needed in the index, the key point, we weren't measuring fertility, we were measuring milk solids. So we had no genetic evaluation or data recording systems for fertility. So we got a few international people. Roel Veerkamp was involved in a project at that stage with Pat Dillon, with Chagas, to really look at getting genetic evaluations for fertility in place. And that was rolled out into the EBI in 2002. But if you follow that yellow line there, which is the genetic trend for fertility performance, and this is by year of birth from the early 90s, where you can see here, this was milk yield. It was going the right way, but fertility was obviously declining. And we were getting no net benefit in overall profit as defined by EBA. And if you actually were to draw a line from here in early 1990 to here 2012 and quantify what lost profit there was as a consequence of poor data recording in terms of female fertility, it lost our dairy industry 800 million euros. So that was the direct consequence of not having good data for fertility on lost profitability within our dairy industry. Now, obviously, the EBI, as I said, was introduced here in 2002, and from there we've been able to make good improvements in both fertility and milk solids. We've accumulated benefits of 100 million to date for animals born up to 2009 that are now milking in our dairy herds, 100 million. And over the next number of years, we're absolutely confident that this is going to continue to grow. And if we look at the stock in the ground, they're going to generate another 270 million over the next 5 years. So it really does help to quantify, the role that data recording has in terms of genetic merit. To talk a wee bit about beef, because this here is our EBI gain, and if we look at what has happened on beef, you can see that we have not been able to achieve anywhere near the same level of gain on beef. Now, you might say, is that due to data recording? It is partly to do with data recording. We're only achieving about 20% of the gain in beef. But rather, I would say, why we're not achieving genetic gain in beef, it's not really down to technical issues, and it's again down to this industry structure. We have a very fragmented industry structure in beef, no different to any other beef country in the world. There is a lack of shared vision, and there's little evidence of long-term investment in breeding programs, the most obvious example being the numbers of bulls progeny tested in beef breeding programs versus dairy. In beef, we're lucky to test 5 to 10 bulls per year. So there isn't the same shared vision, long-term investment in beef as there is in dairy, and it's certainly something that we have to address if to improve genetic gain in beef. And now I want to touch on some genetic trend analysis, and I want to touch on some phenotypic analysis and picking up some milk recording and beef recording data from the cattle breeding database. You'll see this report when you're on the technical tours, for those that are on the dairy technical tours on Thursday. And this is a report which, first and foremost, requires shared vision, because it required ICBF to go to our milk processors and sit down and say, we have really good data in the cattle breeding database, and you have really good data in your milk processor database. Can we actually put the data together to provide a valuable benchmark tool for farmers that combines our cow numbers with your herd bulk tank data at the herd level? And we've been able to do that, and we've been able to provide very, very good figures in terms of, fats, proteins, somatic cell counts, and it's there for all farmers, not just milk recording farmers, because we would see this very much as the entry point for milk recording. This report is available to all dairy farmers in Ireland, and this is the conduit or the kicker to get a farmer to start milk recording. And if we look at just picking up some of that data, because having this sort of data then allows us to do quite a unique type of analysis, because we're able to take the milk processor data from 2009, 10 and 11, about 15,000 dairy herds. We've isolated this initial analysis to just the seasonal herds, but the results are the same for the winter milk herds. And then we have it broken up into the herds that weren't milk recording, and that's about 60%, 66% of the total herds. So these are the herds not milk recording over the 4-year period from 2007 to 2011, and then the herds that were milk recording in each of those 4 years. And the question there is, is there a difference in performance between these two groups of herds based on that milk processor data? And that's after accounting for, fitting a model that accounts for year, herd size, region, milk processor. We've corrected in the analysis for sire genetic merit and breed makeup of the herd. And if you look at the results, the non-milk recording herds were achieving an average of 4,500 litres of milk, 176 kilos of fat, 53 protein, somatic cell count and calving interval. And if we compare that with the herds that were in milk recording, then you can start to see that, yes, these milk recording herds very definitely are delivering better and more milk to the milk processor. So that's a very positive story: more fat, more protein, less cell count and better female fertility. In overall financial terms, it's worth about €103 per cow. So the benefits of milk recording, yes, they're very quantifiable, they're there and they're obvious. Compared to no milk recording herds, we can see the improvements. But the question then that this poses for us is, how much of that is actually due to recording, and how much is it more due to the farmer himself, the knowledge that he has, rather than just being involved in data recording or animal recording? And this is really the key question. It's not so much about data recording. It's, can we get in some way in underneath, is there another component to animal recording? And to do that, we've been able to take the same data set and break first of all, we have the non-milk recording herds, but then break the recording herds into herds that are just milk recording. And by that I mean they're involved in milk recording, but not involved in any other service attached to the cattle breeding database. Because the next service that there is that a farmer could voluntarily get involved in is the Herd Plus one. And it's very much focused on calving and fertility and the genetic merit type data. And you can see about 5% of the herds are milk recording only, about 6% of the herds are milk recording and on Herd Plus. And the next graduation in many ways for a farmer is that he actually has the information. It's more than just data. He's now information, and he wants to share that in a discussion group. And we have a dairy efficiency program that was launched in 2010, and we got a lot of farmers that joined up into that program. And that's in many ways a graduation, that he now has information, but he wants to exchange it. And this fifth group are in many ways the pinnacle in many ways, that they have the data, they're using the information, they're exchanging it, and they have been in discussion groups and working with Teagasc for more than 5 years. And if you look at that analysis, you can see that was the no milk recording herds. The first point to note is that the yes milk recording herds, there really isn't any difference in euros per cow. And it's interesting that whether they're getting better milk solids and better milk solids here. Remember what I said, Herd Plus was about fertility. So they're not getting the additional fertility information that helps them to improve, some of these fertility parameters. So they're not really getting any benefit from milk recording as such. The next group were the Herd Plus guys. So these were milk recording, but we're also on Herd Plus. We're using the fertility, the calving, the breeding information. And here you can see a big jump. We've moved to €122 per cow, better on milk solids, better on fertility performance. The next graduation for our farmers in many ways is to get involved in a discussion group. Now you might say this is quite interesting that, oh gosh, they seem to have dropped back. But there's a reason for that, because these are the farmers, very often the younger farmers, that say, I'm not technically as good on my own. I need to get into a group to share information and exchange information and become better. And as a consequence, you can see initially there is that drop off in milk solids, and fertility performance is largely the same, but certainly in terms of milk solids. But this is where we want our industry to be. It's milk recording, it's using Herd Plus, and it's in discussion groups for a long period of time. And here we can see, milk solids has improved, calving interval has improved, and profit per cow has increased to €155 per cow. So it's not just about data. Data on its own is of limited value. It's that combination of data plus knowledge equals profit. And the key point that we see from our experiences in Ireland is that knowledge comes from data, it's from technical support through the likes of Teagasc and our advisors, through information and sharing, and through exchange and experience. And of course, I've said that this analysis has been corrected for genetic merit, and if we add EBI back in, well then, there's a difference of €200 per cow comfortably in terms of additional benefits in data recording. Is there similar evidence from beef? Well, there is. If we look at the no recording herds in beef versus herds that are involved in a scheme versus those that are in Herd Plus versus those that are in Herd Plus and weight recording, you can see improvements there of the order of €70 or €80. So the same trends are there in beef. Knowledge comes from data, support, information sharing and experience. It's worth about €100 per animal slaughtered. So if we come back to this slide that I started with at the start, which was how do we create, well, it was about genetic gain. I changed the title, how do we create knowledge? Because genetic gain is more than just these technical capabilities over here. It's more than just industry structure. It's about knowledge creation. And that, I believe, or we believe, comes very strongly through this interaction between these key technical people over here and this industry structure. These people that are involved in the industry that are required to put the long-term investment and a vision in. And this comes through how do we create knowledge in Ireland, and these are just some examples. ICBF is certainly a conduit for that by having a structure, vision and leadership, working with Teagasc, our Department of Agriculture, our service providers, and then working with our wider industry. So all through initiatives that bring people together to discuss a common goal, which is profitability for Irish dairy and beef farmers and the wider industry. So in summary, the level of animal recording in Ireland has increased dramatically over the past 10 years, and I would say it's very definitely due to that shared vision that resulted in the creation of the central cattle breeding database. Absolutely, cattle genetics has a major impact on profitability. We got the fertility versus the EBI story, and there are lots of other papers this week that talk strongly about the benefits of genetics in terms of profitability. However, this analysis certainly, I believe, has introduced a new and compelling component, which is that there is evidence that data on its own is not enough, and it is actually more about using the data to create information, to create knowledge that really will generate increased profitability. And if we try and quantify that in an Irish context, it's worth in the order of, €300-400 million per year to our dairy and beef industries. So this is the challenge for Ireland, and it's the challenge for other countries to continue to increase data recording and ensure, as a consequence, much greater knowledge creation within our industry to generate more profit for our dairy and beef farmers. So thank you.